Hey friends, today I'm going to teach you about what a balanced plate looks like. In the diet culture world, people love to make dieting incredibly complex. It does not have to be. If you do nothing else but this balanced plate, you will see incredible changes to how you feel, function, and how you fit your clothes. So grab a plate. Now this one is a little bit smaller. That is one strategy if you're trying to reduce your overall intake of food. This is not a very large dinner plate. It's a more medium dinner plate. So that's one strategy, is just decrease the size of your plate. Then from there, you want to start to divide your plate. And we start by dividing it in half. And we want half of our plate roughly to be non-starchy vegetables. Those are things like cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes, all your lettuce greens and spinach. Eat the rainbow. We want to eat a variety of colors, things like mushrooms, onions, garlic. Okay, we want to eat the rainbow of non-starchy vegetables. Then, after we've divided the plate in half and filled half of it with non-starchy vegetables, we're going to further divide it in half again. And we want to make sure about a quarter of our plate is protein. Okay, those are things like meats, tofu. If you're eating more vegetarian style, beans and lentils will count as a protein. But if you're not, if you are eating meat, we would usually count beans and lentils towards our carbohydrates. Okay. This is the kind of teaching that I get to do with you when you work with me. Okay, but protein, you're thinking mainly meat, okay? But that could also include things like cottage cheese, Greek yogurt. I mentioned tofu. Those are some really good ones. Yeah, we'll stick with those ones. Okay, so half of our plate is vegetables, quarter of our plate is protein. The other quarter is our carbohydrates, or our starches. Starches. That's a new word. Starches. Okay. Carbohydrates are things like bread, your starchy vegetables, so things like potatoes, sweet potatoes. Fruit falls in this carbohydrate portion. Okay, fruit's very important. Don't cut it out, but we do need to moderate it because it does carry a higher level of sugar to it. Okay, so carbohydrates, things like rice, pasta, bread, some of those starchy vegetables like potatoes. Okay, that is another quarter of our plate. And then there's one other component, which is our fat. Our fat often shows up in cooking because fat includes things like oils, butter, and then things like nuts, seeds, and cheese. Okay. So we want to think of those in terms of a thumb size, roughly a tablespoon. Again, sometimes we use those things in cooking. So say we're roasting off some vegetables or we're cooking meat, perhaps it gets cooked in a bit of oil, then that's taken care of. We don't need to add further fat to our plate, okay? Or maybe we have some vegetables and we want to put a little bit of butter on top. Okay, that's some added fat. Or maybe you sprinkle some cheese on top of whatever you're eating. You want to think roughly a tablespoon is equal to 1 serving, okay? So our fat often shows up in our cooking methods or it gets added on top, okay? So balanced plate, half a plate of vegetables, quarter plate of protein, quarter plate of carbohydrates or starchy foods, and then fat is roughly a tablespoon, 1 to 2 servings per meal, and that is your balanced plate. So I encourage you, one of the best ways, most effective ways, is to start to work towards this balanced plate. Now, you might wonder, say, okay, Vanjie, this works sometimes for, some foods, but what about some of those one-pot wonder meals that we make, things like chili, soup, stews? How do we put this philosophy into that? Well, you take that balanced plate philosophy when you're preparing that meal and you apply it just the same. So when you're making a batch of chili or soup, can you make half of it vegetables, or at least work towards that? Okay, half of it vegetables, a quarter of it protein, and then a quarter of it carbohydrates. Quite often, the biggest change is that we do half carbohydrates and only a quarter vegetables. Protein is fairly standard to be about a quarter of the mix, but that's the biggest swap that people usually need to make in trying to balance out their meals. Okay, so we want to think half vegetables, half quarter protein, and quarter carbohydrates, and then a little bit of fat, again often applied in the cooking methods. Okay, if you have questions about this balanced plate, drop me a message, hit like, hit share. But that is one of the best and most simple ways to overhaul your eating without making things really intense. You just have to divide your plate. Have a great day, guys.